次のスピーカーは多分英語でやります。ほとんど英語でやります。Gabe Parker of Citrea っていう会社で、Gabe Parker がこれから話してくれるんですけど、彼実は日本のハーフなんですけど、確か英語で話します。So next up is Gabe Parker of Citrea. You may have heard of Citrea. I believe his presentation is going to be in English, unlike Christian's. So whenever, how's it looking? We'll have probably time for a few questions after this one as well. So just like the last session, if you have questions, hang on to them and ask them at the end. ここも質疑応答の時間少しあるので、質問あったら最後に聞いてください。
Testing.皆さん、こんにちは。私の名前はガブリエル・ヒロト・パーカーです。よろしくお願いします。今、私はシチリアで事業開発しています。シチリアの前に、僕はギャラクシーでビットコインのリサーチをしていました。シチリアは新しいビットコイン L2 です。でも今日の話はシチリアじゃなくて、ビットコイン DeFi です。So for English, I do run business development at Citrea. Citrea is a new Bitcoin L2. It's the first CK roll on Bitcoin. And today we're going to be talking about the landscape of real Bitcoin DeFi. What is Bitcoin DeFi in a simple form? Well, we all know DeFi usually exists on Ethereum, Solana, any programmable chain. But unfortunately, Bitcoin, it's very hard to build applications on the base layer. So as a result, Bitcoin doesn't have as much of a robust DeFi ecosystem as other more like EVM type chains. So, Bitcoin yield has been a bigger topic in the past couple of years. So why Bitcoin yield is important for Bitcoin holders is, as a Bitcoin holder, your number one goal is to stack sats. What that means is you hold Bitcoin and you grow your Bitcoin without doing anything, so passively, right? An example of this is for like Ethereum and Solana. You can just hold both Ethereum and Solana and stake it. And at the end of the year, you will have more tokens than you did in the beginning, right? So, with Bitcoin, there is no staking, right? So essentially, there's no risk-free rate on Bitcoin. The risk-free rate for Ethereum, for example, is the staking rate, which is 2.7%. Reason why risk-free rates are important is because as we get more traditional finance people in crypto, this idea of risk-free rate is actually really, really important for portfolio managers, and it helps them make decisions, right? So yeah, historically, right, like Bitcoin hasn't had much DeFi, but I would say more recently in the past year or two, there's been newer ways to kind of do DeFi with Bitcoin. But there's a caveat to that. So here, I looked into what are Bitcoiners doing with DeFi on-chain. So this right here is a list of all wrapped versions of Bitcoin. So what the problem is that because there's no DeFi on Bitcoin, people move their Bitcoin to Ethereum mostly, right? So all of this Bitcoin that should be on Bitcoin is actually on Solana and Ethereum because those environments have more DeFi that they can use your Bitcoin with, right? So as it stands right now, right, there's about $34 billion worth of Bitcoin that's wrapped and moved away from Bitcoin. Once you break that down, about 56% of this is on Ethereum, and most of this money here is used for Bitcoin-backed lending. So in Nihongo, Bitcoin Tampo Yushi is the biggest use case of Bitcoin DeFi on Ethereum. And then we have BTC DeFi on other chains like Solana, Sui, Aptos, which represents around 12%. And then this big part right here is a newer innovation created by Babylon, which is the staking layer for Bitcoin. It's not really staking, but this represents 31%. So the main takeaway here is that there's billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin that's trying to earn yield, even just a little bit of yield. The problem is that this is all happening not on Bitcoin, on Ethereum, other chains. So that's one problem. The other problem is that the yields are actually not enough. So for here, for Bitcoin Temple UC, when you deposit Bitcoin for lending, as a depositor, you're only earning about 0.04% yield on your Bitcoin, which is not a lot. And for staking, which is this big part, staking is like 1% yield. And 1% is too low, right? So the problem, what we need to do is figure out ways to actually make this yield more than 1%. And when I talk to big investors and big holders of Bitcoin, they all agree that 1% or this 0.04% is too low. The allocators really want to get anywhere from 3 to 4%. So currently it's difficult to do on chain. So what I did was I, went through the different types of strategies to actually achieve the target of 3 to 4%. So we covered these two columns in the previous slide. So, but once you move down to here, you kind of see the yields go up with more institutional grade strategies, right? So here I have the two columns of sustainability. So how long can this last for? And accessibility. So how easy is it for you as a Bitcoin holder to take part in these yield strategies? So I'll kind of break down some of them here. So this column right here, inflationary tokens sold for BTC. An example of this is Core. Core is another Bitcoin L2, a competitor to ours, you can say. And they're offering 4.5% on Bitcoin you stake on Core. That's a pretty good number, right? But the problem is that Core gets 4.5% by selling their Core native token, and then they sell it for BTC and they give BTC back to you. So the problem is that the Core token has nothing to do with Bitcoin. So they're going to keep selling Core, and at a certain point, this 4.5% will drop significantly. But it's very easy to get access to. Anyone here can, bridge BTC to Core and get whatever yield, but it's not a sustainable strategy. So now we go down to the more institutional side, unsecured lending. What this means is you lend Bitcoin to an institution, and institution puts up no collateral, reputable name, you can trust that they'll pay you back. This is around 4% right now. But the reason why this is it's low accessibility is because if you want to lend Bitcoin to an institution, like example I use like Galaxy, where I used to work, you need to do KYC, AML, and you need to open up an account, which is usually like $5 million, $4 million. So it's really hard to get access to that. Lending to miners is also very, it's a decent yield strategy as well. Miners like to borrow Bitcoin and they sell it for cash, and then they use the cash for daily operations. And the reason why this works for them is because they have to pay the loan back in Bitcoin, and miners generate Bitcoin every day. So the problem here, it's medium accessibility, but for an average Bitcoiner, how do you get in contact with the lenders, right? So the last one I'll kind of go through, which is my favorite yield product, is this covered calls strategy. So what this means is you give Bitcoin to an institution and they sell options on your BTC and collect a premium. And this premium is your yield as a depositor. So this one also it's very hard to access because you need to have millions of dollars for the institution to run this for you. So it's not easy for everyday Bitcoiners to get access to these, good yields, right? Only the really rich can get access to the high yields. So yeah, kind of highlighted some of the problems, but just the main problem is that, high quality Bitcoin yield is very hard to get access to, right? And as of right now, like the real Bitcoin DeFi is mostly moving off chain, right? Because some of those strategies I mentioned, it doesn't occur on a blockchain. It's all off chain, which could be a problem as well for other reasons. But the main thing is we just need to improve like natural yield on chain that's accessible to every user. Yeah, so one reason why it's important to improve the landscape of Bitcoin yield is because, I call this the treasury wave. So everyone knows Bitcoin treasuries like MetaPlanet, they're buying a lot of Bitcoin. And something that we see is that smaller treasury companies, they actually want to put their Bitcoin on chain to get a yield. So, I mean, you can see, right, like the difference between strategy versus, the blockchain group in terms of, where's the number, BTC held, it's a huge gap. So in order for the smaller treasury companies to compete, so we've been talking to a couple smaller treasury companies that actually want to deploy some of their BTC on Citrea to get access to some of our yield products, which I'll get into later. This is big, by the way. I think no one's really talking about this, but Bitcoin treasury companies are going to be one of the largest users for Bitcoin DeFi, which is why we need to start working on it now. Okay, so how do we think about Bitcoin DeFi at Citrea? I like to make it really simple. So for us, the biggest goal is make institutional grade yield accessible to all users, right? And these yield strategies themselves need to be transparent, safe, and conservative. I think transparency is the most important part because strategy is, who they're working with. On Citrea, I think what we're going to do now is all of our yield products will have all the details of which institution are they working with. In terms of conservativeness, achieving a lower rate for yield to make sure they're not being too risky. But I think this is something that Bitcoin DeFi kind of lacks today. Just the ability to tell the user, hey, this is who we're working with. This is the counterparty risk, and proving the strategy is actually being done, which can be done on chain actually. Oh, no. So, okay, with these goals in mind, right? So how do you achieve this? We think that vaults is a very good solution to make Bitcoin yield, like high grade Bitcoin yield. A vault is basically a pulls in everyone's BTC, and once the vault is closed, an institution will take that pool of BTC and do, yield strategies on it. So, the reason why vaults solves a lot of problems is because now when you pool everyone's assets together and you use a middleman, which is the vault platform, the institutions only need to KYC and do AML with the vault provider, not every single user, right? So the vault actually opens up the doors to work with institutions when you're just a small time Bitcoin holder, right? There's no more, $2 million minimums to open up an account. You can actually just use the vault itself is taking away so many steps and barriers. And the BTC itself sits on the L2. And whenever the institution needs access to it, these vaults are secured by a multi-sig, which would be a group of the institution, Citrea, and the vault provider, right? So you're not just blindly leaving your Bitcoin at some institutional address. So one example, what we're doing is we're partnering with top OTC desks like Galaxy. Galaxy is actually an investor in Citrea. So, we'll partner with OTC desk, trading desks like Galaxy that will run these option vaults for Citrea users. So the reason why we think this is a huge unlock is because I remember seeing when I was at Galaxy, having access to a really good trading desk is extremely hard. But, with a vault, you can remove those barriers that I mentioned before. So I think we're going to enter into a new phase of Bitcoin yield products where the everyday user can get access to super high quality yield products that are safe. We don't want to repeat any like the BlockFi or Celsius stuff. We learned a lot from that. So yeah, it's very, very exciting. And finally, right, like where should this activity exist? In my view, right, like if you're going to use Bitcoin for DeFi, you have to wrap it. That's like for sure at this point. But I think it's better to build your DeFi around trust minimized Bitcoin. So when I say trust minimized BTC is that the BTC that's on Citrea is trust minimized because the money is secure by the bridge. And because when you use L2s, I don't know if you guys have, you have to bridge your Bitcoin. And our bridge, the way the security model works is that there's 12 entities that secure the bridge, and only one of the 12. This is actually a lot different than something like Stacks or Rootstock or Liquid. Signers up for the bridge, and 7 of the 12 need to be honest. Which means that Citrea actually get posted to Bitcoin. So every single Bitcoin node knows your balance and what's happening on Citrea. This is actually a lot different than other Bitcoin L2s, where they don't really get security from the native main Bitcoin chain. Yeah, so that's kind of like my view on when we're improving Bitcoin DeFi, like where should this exist? I don't think Bitcoin DeFi should exist on Ethereum. It shouldn't exist on Solana. Bitcoin DeFi should be connected to Bitcoin. And I think this is the first step towards that. So, here you can get access to our website, our Twitter, and this QR code is for the Citrea website. I hope it translates well to Japanese. So yeah, I mean, we are still in testnet, and we plan to go mainnet in middle of October. So, middle October, if you want to explore like Citrea's DeFi ecosystem that I was mentioning, we'll be ready then. So that's all I have. Yeah, happy to take Simon.
Thank you. And I want to ask, is your product designed for the retail investor or the institution?
It's for both. I think like the vault products that I mentioned to you before, they're designed for retail, but we've talked to a couple smaller treasury companies with larger size that are interested in deploying into the same vault. So the idea is you want to cater to both. Of course, I mean, retail for us is very important, but at the same time, we know that there's a lot of institutions that are ready to deploy Bitcoin. So you want to build products that can service both sides.
Do you think it's quite difficult for the retail investor to access your product?
No, not at all. I mean, so essentially you just need a wallet that is a Bitcoin wallet and an EVM wallet. So we actually have a wallet called Tenari that does that. And within the wallet, you can bridge all your Bitcoin to Citrea yourself. So no, our onboarding process is super easy. And we actually take a lot of pride into that because we understand that doing things with your Bitcoin is rare. Not many people have done that before. So we want to make it super easy to access Citrea with your Bitcoin and also to go back to Bitcoin. The idea is you go to Citrea, you do all the DeFi stuff, and then maybe you go back to Bitcoin when you're done, right? So that's kind of how we want to encourage like that type of user flow.
Thank you.
Hey, so you towards the beginning you claimed you want to establish like a risk-free rate on Bitcoin, and I think you characterized staking on Ethereum as kind of an analog to a risk-free rate, but that's not entirely true, obviously, and I also don't think anything on Citrea would exactly be risk-free either. So is there some other criteria you're referring to as risk-free rate? Or is this...
Yeah, I think maybe opportunity cost is a better terminology, right? Like if you want to, for example, lend out Ethereum, you need to lend it out more than the staking rate as a default, right? Because the opportunity cost of lending it out lower just makes no sense to business. No, I totally agree with you. Like there is really no such thing as risk-free rate. I mean, even treasuries, right? Like US get default and you get rugged. But yeah, I agree. Look, like Ethereum's risk-free rate is not really risk-free because all the validators are controlled by the same people and it's really centralized. So I think, yeah, risk-free rate might be the wrong word, but I guess what I'm trying to say is like what's the opportunity cost of each asset? I mean, ETH has it, Sol has it. For Bitcoin, it's tough because like I don't know if I lend you Bitcoin at 2%, am I losing money for that? Like, is the opportunity cost that I evaluate that correct? I actually don't know, right? So yeah, does that answer?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
それでちょっと日本語で
大丈夫です。
シトレアさん、ビット VM との関係といいますか、あと、開発とかでゼロ知識証明みたいな、高機能暗号を使われていると思うんですけど、そのシトレアさんのそのエンジニアのそのゼロ知識証明の、なんていうか、リテラシーのスキルレベルというか、そういうのってどれぐらい、やっぱりすごい高度な暗号も理解されているような方が、バックエンドで開発されているのか。
A little bit.
Are you using things like BitVM or zero knowledge proofs on the back end of Citrea?
Yeah, so the bridge is a BitVM bridge, as you said. So Citrea is one of the leading contributors to BitVM. So yes, the bridge uses BitVM, and the ZK proofs themselves are posted on Bitcoin to basically verify or validate the state transitions on Citrea. So yeah, we are using BitVM, BitVM2 specifically, and at launch, that's the bridge that'll be the native bridge from Bitcoin to Citrea. And that's why with BitVM, it's trust minimized BTC, because BitVM bridge means that only one of the bridge providers needs to be honest for the money to be safe.
最近ビット VM3 とかが
garbled
出てる
circuits。
と思うんですけど、ストレアはビット VM2 を使ってるってことですね。
ビット VM3 は、なんか garbled circuits というテクノロジー使ってるけど、そのテクノロジーまだ、なんかテスティング終わってないので、メインネットはビット VM2。そしたら多分1年ぐらいその garbled circuit のビット VM3 のテクノロジーを多分、
ありがとうございます。
他にないですか？質問。All right. Thank you very much, Gabe.
ありがとうございます。